So everyone, it's wonderful to have really such a high-ranking panel join us for this very important conversation, and now it's my pleasure to introduce each of them. So along with Jeremy Sampson, who you already know very well and just heard from, we're also honored to welcome the Minister of Tourism and Heritage of the Sultanate of Oman, His Excellency Salim bin Mohammed Al Mahrouki. So welcome to you. I would also, of course, like to remind everybody that Oman is this year's partner country for ITB 2024, so that's why we're especially honored that His Excellency could take part in our panel today. So it's wonderful to welcome you. We're also very honored to welcome Croatia's Minister of Tourism and Sports, Her Excellency Nikolina Vrnjac.
Thank you.
Welcome, Minister. And next, I'm pleased to welcome Julia Simpson. She is President and CEO of the World Travel and Tourism Council, which is also sometimes known by the abbreviation WTTC. And the WTTC is the global authority on the economic and social contribution of travel and tourism. So welcome. For a European perspective, we're very pleased to welcome Misa Labarila. She is a policy officer working at the European Commission on tourism, and she also happens to be the host of the EU Smart Tourism podcast called Smart Gets You Further. So everybody can look up this podcast after the session, of course. And last but not least, a very warm welcome to Zorica Urošević. She is the Executive Director of UN Tourism, which was formerly known as the World Tourism Organization. But even under the new name, this organization is the UN Specialized Agency for Tourism and also happens to be the global leader of tourism for development and driving social and economic change. So welcome as well. I would like to begin with Minister Vrnjac because Croatia recently launched reforms for managing the development of sustainable tourism, and these reforms have been recognized as an example of best practice for the development of tourism not only in Europe, but in fact around the world. So can you tell us a little bit about these reforms and what impact do you expect?
So thank you, Mariana, for this kind of introduction, and I'm happy to be again here this year on ITB Berlin and to discuss some important issues regarding tourism transition and green and digital transition especially. So as you mentioned in the beginning, yes, we started a new big reform of tourism sector. It started in 2020. In the worst period for tourism sector, in the COVID period, we knew that it was a time for the change of the paradigm of whole tourism. And if we don't use it now or then we will never use it. So it was a good opportunity for us. And we started with, we made, first of all, strategical document for sustainable tourism, which was very much important because it gave us goals. First one goal is year-round tourism development, regionally balanced development, tourism that protects environment and climate, tourism that is prosperous, and tourism that is resilient. So for us, all of the key goals, 4 of the key goals were important because, first of all, you had to, if you don't have satisfied local community, first of all, then you cannot comment about competitive tourism sector. If you don't include local community in the sector and the strategy, then also there is no positive outcome. Then we knew that we are a very beautiful country, as all of the countries here which are among us, and we wanted to preserve our cultural heritage, we wanted to preserve our natural heritage, and these were the main reasons, and satisfaction of the local people and the local community. And these were the reasons what we integrated actually in our strategy for sustainable development. Also, what we are proud of is that we all included all 17 SDG goals through UN Agenda for Sustainable Development in our strategy. And that was a huge advantage, I would say, for also later on implementation. And then we did a national plan of implementation of all of these goals. And regarding the national plan and all of the documents which we made, we knew that without funds, we cannot achieve the goals also. So we started negotiations with the European Commission, and now together with all of from the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, with multi-annual financial framework, with the state budget funds, but only, as I said, for the green and digital transition, for the climate mitigation, for the tourism diversification of the tourist products. We have until 2030 about 1.3 billion euros for the tourism. But through our strategy documents and national plan, we know where to invest. And now we are making it much, much easier to the private sector, for them also to know what is our strategy as a government, as a policy maker. And last but not least, we then, from the strategy and from all of the documents, the crown of our reform is Act on Tourism. So we used the help from OECD, who made us analytics from all of the countries, especially Mediterranean countries, to all of legislative acts, and we read them and see in which position, what are they doing now. And we knew that with the strategy document, with all the national plans, with the budget, but without the framework, without a legislative framework, we cannot do anything on the field in Croatia, because it is important how the local communities and regional communities will react on this act. So we included them in these decisions. So it was important. It consists of this reform of a lot of indicators and a lot of inclusion. And as I said, local community was one of the most important things to be included in making this act.
Yeah, thank you very much for describing this. There's so many players involved in making something like this actually work. And just like Croatia, Oman is also famous for beautiful coastlines, also in Croatia, and also many exquisite cultural heritage sites. But there's always this challenge of balancing sort of the need for economic development, also for the benefit of local communities, but you also want to protect nature and cultural heritage sites. So, Minister Al-Mahrouki, how do you, in your country, try to balance all of these different requirements?
Yeah, thank you, Mariana. Well, we have been doing lots of good things for the past 40 years, but without a strategy. The fact that Oman was among the first few countries having a ministry dedicated to environment since 1973. And literally no project is allowed to go forward unless it meets specific requirements related to its implication on the environment. However, since then, the country has developed profoundly, and more people are living in Oman, and the population has grown. And like anything else, development can be a sword with two edges. Yeah. It changes behaviors. It has a footprint on the ground, and the impact on natural resources are there to be seen. It's a paradox, as you said. You need to maintain a balance between development and mitigation and management of the impact that comes along that development. In a sense, we are lucky that we are still developing our sectors, and in the process, we are able to govern the process and therefore control the impact. The fact that tourism is becoming increasingly a main sector of economic diversity, this puts more pressure and more urgency on regulations, on policy making, on capacity buildings, on more investment and incentives to the private sector. And therefore, the kind of partnership between the private sector and the government is very critical, is very important. Capacity building is a bread of the day, one that requires more resources, more alignment. The fact that Oman is committed to zero option emission, it means that we have to accelerate the process. I know that this is almost a blanket application. All of us are lagging behind. There are many challenges there. Challenge from within and challenge from without, whether that is related to investment, the infrastructure, mitigations, transparency, as WTTC has, has conducted many research and put forward many empirical studies related to this subject. And therefore, it is important that we continue building our capacity from within and regionally as well. It is important that we align our efforts together. And within the GCC countries, there's a common belief that this is an option that should be followed. Internally, the country is diverse, and the landscape can be challenging in terms of the varieties that exist there. You need to educate and attract tourists who are more conscious. And the fact that we see increasingly that more tourists are more prone to sustainable options when it comes to choices. And I think this should be encouraged and should be a platform for all of us to operate from within. So they are challenged from within. But I can assure all of you that the government is committed. And when it comes to tourism, we are making sure that all will be follow the guidelines, the policies. It is important that the public be fully aware. Local communities should be convinced that they have a stake, they have benefits coming from developing destinations that they measured with the proper KPIs in order that we all benefit and no one lose and left behind.
Well, one of the things that Minister Birnac mentioned as a guideline for Croatia's reforms was the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development, and this agenda also includes climate action specifically. So I'd like to now turn to Zorica Urosevic from UN Tourism. How does your organization then support the tourism sector to achieve net zero? And in particular, we hear about these challenges and what it takes to also make local populations feel connected to these measures, that they ultimately will benefit. What does your organization do to support then the member states?
Thank you for having us today, and good morning to everyone, ministers and ladies. The World Tourism Organization, as you very well know, was a great contributor to the build-up of the Sustainable Development Agenda, the 2030 Agenda, and the 17 goals. When it comes to climate, there is a singled-out SDG with the SDG 13, but SDG 13 cannot stand alone because there is an interconnectedness. The most important element to consider is looking as well at the lens of the SDG 12, which is sustainable consumption and production. And therefore, in order to prepare the capacity of the countries and of the industry, UNWTO with the United Nations Environment Programme is leading a One Planet Sustainable Tourism Program, which is actually crystallizing, embedding, bringing partners together, public, private foundations, civil society, and academia, and most importantly, science. Because I think that, and thank you earlier, Jeremy, you were underlying that, and tomorrow I am on a panel where I really think we should be moving into a science-based climate economy. And I call it economy because we all know that tourism is considered and evaluated today through GDP, and it is a service, trade services sector. So we were third services sector after fuel and chemicals in terms of exports in 2019. We are now dropped to fifth, but it is a very important sector. So when it comes to climate, in 2021, we launched in the UNFCCC at COP the Glasgow Declaration, which is I can see the bedrock, Jeremy, of what you were sharing earlier, and which is a kind of a common ground that rallies public and private sector. We have more than 850 signatories, about 60 destinations, 11 countries, and all industry. Because change cannot occur without industry change. Because we, public sector, we can be sitting as much as we want creating rules and regulations. If we do not penetrate and connect with the private sector, which is the operator, we will never change. And we will never drive to this change that is necessary to net zero. I mean, in doing that, we need as well to connect the people that travel, but the people, as both ministers were mentioning, the people that are going to welcome these visitors. Therefore, I think the connection between climate definitely needs to look at the economy, because we know that many big firms, which are doing very well today in the sustainability agenda, do it for two purposes. Most of these big companies are listed. They are more competitive because they reduce the operation costs while they are doing good for the planet. So this double positive impact, I can say, one on the economy, and which is good, one on the society and on the value and the environment is really important. Now, where we have really a huge issue and a huge problem is for SMEs. 80% of the industry is represented by SMEs. And how are we going to support those enterprises, which most of the time, if there are like 10 rooms, the operator and the owner is doing the marketing, the hosting, the promotion, everything. So these people have no knowledge, do not have the understanding and the knowledge. One is the knowledge, and two is the capacity to invest for change. And I think this is where we should be very much focusing as well in the future, and everyone here, because, well, we need to accelerate the path towards net zero. Big companies, and I'm speaking about hospitality mainly here. I'm not speaking about aviation, because as you very well know, in the UN system, we have a sister agency which is called ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, with whom we work, which is dealing with aviation. Of course, we call upon, I can say, air transport and transport in general in the whole value chain. But the realm of influence that we have is definitely on all these other parts of the sector.
Right, so as you rightly mentioned, it's not just about the governments doing their part, it also involves the other key stakeholders, like you mentioned airlines, but it's also hotels and tour operators, and I know that the World Travel and Tourism Council actually engages with these players, so can you tell us about the work that you do to push them in a more climate-friendly direction?
Thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you for inviting all of us, and thank you for hosting a wonderful ITB. I'm very proud of Oman and everything it's doing. And I'd like to say it's a great challenge from Jeremy at the start, because we need people like Jeremy in the room, really, really pushing us, because we don't have a lot of time. That's the answer. And the UN just recently have done this amazing framework. I mean, it's one of the most important. You're hiding your success under your light under a bushel.
I'm keeping it for the end.
I'll leave it. But they've really just done this most incredible framework that is going to change the way countries look at what they're doing. And it's really amazing. So we at WTTC, we're the private sector, as you say, the cruise lines, the airlines, the airports, right across. And one of my concerns was, if you can't count something, you can't control it, which is why some of you may have heard me last night, but we've tried to create a set of data that really looks at, in terms of travel and tourism, by country, exactly where is our carbon emissions coming from. Also other issues, our water usage, our diversity, how we work with communities. But if we just stick to environment, and we've come up with quite a big figure. And as Jeremy said, the travel and tourism sector is continuing to grow, and our emissions are continuing to grow. The only good thing is they are decoupling. So the growth in emissions is decoupling from our actual growth. And obviously that's not good enough. We have got 10 countries, Croatia's one of them, where actually the gross emissions, the whole emissions in travel and tourism is reducing. But the important part about the data is it tells us how and why is this happening. So what we found out with the data is that 40% of all our carbon emissions come from transport, which we know. Of that 40%, I thought the vast majority was going to be airlines, but actually about 50-50 is ground transport, because there is so much ground transport. You know, the cars we all got to come here today, we're all visitors here to Berlin. You know, we are creating a carbon footprint, every vehicle that we have been in. So one of the most important messages is actually electrification, doing that as much as we can. I know not every country can do that, but electrification of vehicles. The next thing, obviously, is aviation. And aviation, there's lots of interesting work with nuclear fission, hydrogen, electrics, but actually what we have in our grasp at the moment is sustainable aviation fuel. It's not perfect. I'm sure Jeremy could say, you know, oh, they say it cuts 80% emissions. That's not always true. And actually, sometimes you've got to be careful where the stock's coming from to make your SAF. But actually, in a hard-to-abate area, it is a science that we have in our hands today. We can actually create SAF. And sustainable aviation fuel, sorry for these ghastly abbreviations, that's another problem with sustainability, can I just say, is all the horrible acronyms. But new generation fuel, which is probably a better way of calling it, we can make it. We have a regulatory framework, which anything to do with aviation is so difficult and delicate. So we've got that, so we need to make more. We're just not making enough. And I'm very a great defender, because I think just to say aviation is the big evil, it allows us all to sort of go, you know, it's not us, it's not the hotels, it's aviation, but it is a whole society issue, and we need to get our backs behind it. And then on the 80%, I completely agree with you. 80% of small businesses in our sector are. You know, when I was in Oman, I saw lots of wonderful small businesses working with local communities, bringing people, training people, incredible, and actually trying to work in a very, very green way. But what we tried to do, again, is we felt a lot of the small hotels. I'll give you a silly example. Some of the big chains, Hilton, they're all doing great things. They're doing fantastic things. But, you know, I went to a small hotel with my family in France, and I wanted a cocktail. Sorry, sometimes I have a cocktail. And they arrived with the cocktail. There were like 20 straws coming out of it, like 20 plastic straws. And I thought, I'm in France. You know, what's happening here? So we've created a product called Hotel Sustainability Basics, and it's for those small and medium chains where they don't necessarily have a big team of sustainability people, but they can do 9 out of 12 things, quite straightforward things, and they get that first step on the ladder. Obviously, we want to get them through to the GST, the proper, you know, standard, and we're not trying to claim that territory. But the other thing about it is it's a global recognition, so that I can work with countries like Croatia. Croatia have got a very good scheme, but you can white label it. So actually, everybody in the world is doing the same thing. And I think the other point I wanted to make about 80-20 is don't stand still to get everything perfect. You know, we're out there, we've got nearly up to 2,000 hotels in this. It's going forward. Is it going to be perfect? No. But, you know, if we can get a big volume of people to do just a little bit, that's going to make a lot of change.
Julia, I am surprised to hear you got so many straws in a hotel in France, but if it was a hotel in the United States, you would have gotten 15 straws and 75 napkins and some plastic forks as well. So anyway, the United States, that's where I'm from, but I've also lived in Europe for many, many years, and I'm always impressed actually at how far European countries have come when it comes to sustainability. And we all know about the European Union's Green Deal, and that the EU wants Europe to become the world's first climate neutral continent. So I don't know whether this is a realistic.
I'm so happy you brought it up.
Yes.
I've been listening to all of this.
Yes.
Thinking,
So,
but we have so much we can do together, and we are doing together. So
Nisa, please tell us, is this a realistic goal, and how is the EU making sure that it will achieve this goal?
It's an ambitious goal. It's an ambitious goal. Whether it is realistic or not depends on how well we work with the private sector, with international partners. We can do it together, and with the governments. And Croatia started off with a bang. They've already put forward what we want to achieve for tourism, which we want it more sustainable, but also, which is not just more greener. We want it more inclusive. We want it more, you know, closer to the local communities. We want it more digital and also respectful of diversity, so more accessible. She's already said everything. So we work very closely with the government. Are those targets achievable? I think they are. In the past 5 years, obviously, the European citizens in the room know that it's almost time to vote. In June, we're voting for the new Commission. But in the past 5 years, with this Commission, I think a lot has been done. The Green Deal it's probably known as a label, as something you can Google, and when you Google it, you find a web page that gives you a lot of acronyms, which we all hate. They're terribly, they're impossible to memorize, but the Green Deal really is a number of actions, laws, legislative actions, regulations that bring us that much closer to these standards. And we are so confident in those targets that we have, just a month ago, stepped it up a little. So this commission is handing over everything that we have done to the next, and we don't know who's going to be, but the recommendation is, right, you've done this much, and for the next 5 years, you want to set up new legislative proposals, and I'm calling them proposals, because they only become laws if the governments help us with this, and the parliament. But you want to set up new proposals so that we can achieve a cut of emissions by 90% by 2040 compared to where we were in 1990. And this is a massive step up compared to where we are now, but already we're doing so much better than we were before. Aviation has been mentioned. It's a law now that as of next year, companies, airlines will have to use progressively more and more sustainable fuel, up until 70% in 2050. So like, this is law, this is a fact, there's no skipping this is happening. The same with trade emissions. The European Union has made sure, and this is law, this is a fact, this is not going anywhere. We have made sure that producing trade emissions now will cost you money. And it's always been for free, but not anymore, because like Jeremy said, we need to step it up. So we have, and we will do more, and I think it is perfectly possible. The reason why I say it is, and I don't want to repeat what I've said, but the reason why I say it is because I think we work so well with our partners. In tourism, all I've talked about so far goes well beyond tourism. This is across the industry. But in tourism, we have a whole mechanism to work, that forces us to work with our partners. And it is big companies, small and medium enterprises who can't obviously travel to Brussels to meet us and tell us what they want, but they can lobby, and there are lobbies who push to us for their interest, and governments. And we do this pretty often. I'd say that we meet, 4 times a year. The governments give us agendas. They give us homework, often, things that they want us to do, to put on the table. The Parliament does the same. So we have inputs from everywhere. And we always welcome in more. And there's so much more I could say, but just to conclude on this, and to give you a bit the measure of how much we work with our partners, including international partners. I'll be very happy to talk to our international partners too. If you have a project, if you're doing anything that takes us that little bit closer to sustainable tourism, innovative tourism, inclusive tourism, anything that has to do with our priorities, which are our common priorities, and I have not heard one word that deviates from our common priorities, then please just Google the EU strategy for tourism. It has a name, it's called Transition Pathway. If you can't find it, just Google EU tourism strategy. And there you will find a way to tell us what you do. Use it. It's just a very simple form, which will allow you to be in touch with us. Tell us what you do. We'll come under our radar, make sure that you are visible, and we can give you extra visibility and put you in touch with extra partners so that we can work together as much as possible. Because the problem we have at the European Commission is we're a small team. It looks big, but it's not. We're a small team, and we have an internal market, a single market to build. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at this clock, and I cannot even believe my eyes that we're actually approaching the end of our time for this panel. So organizers, next year you have to give us a full hour to discuss, okay? So this is just the beginning of this conversation. But I would like to give Jeremy at least an opportunity to maybe have the final word, because what I keep hearing from every other member of this panel is just how important international cooperation and knowledge sharing is. So we have no planet B, right? Like, we are all impacted by climate change, and the only way we can mitigate the effects of climate change is if we are all working together to the best of our abilities, depending on where we are, who we are, and what means we have. So Jeremy, just listening to the other panelists, how do you see the importance of this type of international collaboration and knowledge sharing?
Well, it's not just importance, it's imperative. I mean, we're talking all the time about the business case for change. If anyone is sitting around waiting for consumers to start requesting climate-friendly travel and close the gap between intention and action, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is that we're going to work behind the scenes to design a system that will actually create real change at scale. And what you hear today are great examples of, where each of these individuals and the ecosystem that they work within is advancing. So what we need to look for now is that common agenda. And that has to be guided by science. That has to be guided by the international agreements that have been set out by and told to us by scientists that are showing us where to go. So if we can align around those common principles and coordinate those efforts so that it's not a bunch of fragmented agendas and here we are doing our thing, look at us, but working together to align and find, and there will be tensions and negotiations because this is not easy. There will be trade-offs that need to be made, but that can only happen together. Everyone can't make trade-offs on their own and decide which way to go. So I think we have the framework in front of us, and the call to action is to make sure that we're aligning at the right scale and stop the tinkering and performative stuff because it actually doesn't matter at the end of the day. Yeah.
Anything to add from any of our panelists?
Yes.
Yes.
So we can go from here and then down the...
Thank you very much. I would just like to add that somebody said in the beginning it is important to have the data. So we know, everybody knows, without the data, we cannot do anything. Without the correct data, you cannot do anything. You can make wrong decisions. So for us, it was very much important that we put the data in our framework, legislative framework. So it was much easier to collect the data, correct data, because it's evidence-based policy making. And with this help, now every mayor, every prefect can do decisions and to ensure that we are going to go in right decision management of the tourism towards sustainability. So, and I would like to thank also the Commission for the great help which they are giving us, and also to the Zorica and also Julia. So we have really excellent cooperation through all of these 4 years of my mandate, and without of their help and then something what we did together was also with Zorica indicators for sustainability. Indicators for sustainability are so important, all of 3 indicators, economical, social indicators, and ecological indicators. So it now allows us to measure it through all of the 4 years for example, the city of Dubrovnik, which everybody knows, from the beginning until the end. The improvements in the utility infrastructure, improvements in transport infrastructure, improvements in electricity, and so on. So all the satisfaction of the local community, everything is included together in this legislative framework. It is now much, much easier with all of the data. So thank you. Thank you again, ladies.
I will be very short, and thank you very much to Jeremy and to the Minister Nicolina. The beauty is, and I want to share with you, that the UN, the United Nations, meaning 193 countries last week have adopted the UN statistical framework for measuring the sustainability in tourism, which is 7 years of very heavy efforts from everyone. Many of you certainly around the table and in the room, but around this forum exactly. So this is going to be the first UN framework beyond GDP. And we are very proud as a sector to come as first of measuring sustainability beyond economy. So society, planet, environment are fully there. So this is going to be at national, subnational, destination level. And I want as well to share that we have launched now a pioneering ESG framework, which is going to be the mirror of the public sector statistics to the private sector, comparable data gathering and compilation. And I know that everybody here is on board, and you mentioned it. Thank you for mentioning without disclosing, but I think this is really to be celebrated. This is really going to be a game changer for everyone.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We are out of time. So as I said, this is only the beginning of the conversation. Many thanks indeed to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.